A fundamental principle of the penal systems in this country is that people are sent to prison as punishment, not for punishment. Here's what we're talking about today. The United States Army Disciplinary Barracks, which is located in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, um, is different than the big federal penitentiary there. They have a big federal penitentiary in Fort Leavenworth also, the city, not the actual fort. The disciplinary barracks is where the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, it's where they send all their bad people who need to be punished, who need to go to prison for something they did while they were in the military. And they have that motto, as punishment, not for punishment. And of course, what that means is the punishment is the confinement, the ability not to get up and walk away and go somewhere, to be told when to eat, what to eat, and to follow the rules. Or you get something that they call penalty loaf, which is edible, but is not tasty at all. They have a number of different ways of making you conform to the rules, but none of them are physical punishment, like beating or whipping or hurting the people physically in any way. And that's because they want to modify behavior, not necessarily harm the individuals. And I think it's a really good way of looking at correctional facilities. The punishment is being confined, it's not getting whipped on by the guards. Unfortunately, there are some people who don't understand that, and today we have the trial of three, or I should say, we have the opening statements in the case of three corrections officers who apparently beat an inmate to death. Now, this is going to be one of those cases where I think reasonable people are going to have different views of it. My view is there is never an excuse to beat a prisoner unless he has somebody else in a chokehold or is going to do something in the immediate future that's going to seriously harm someone. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any blows struck. But again, different prisons have different rules, and I understand that. Let's listen to a little bit of the prosecutor's opening statement in this case.
Thank you very much, Judge Bauer, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for your kind attention during the jury selection process, and I would congratulate you. So many of your neighbors were excused. Each and every one of you impressed 8 very, very experienced lawyers in this courtroom to suggest to us that you will decide this case exactly as you said you would, fairly and impartially, and let the chips fall where they may. I hope you are as anxious to learn about the horrible death of Robert Brooks as I am in the next few minutes to educate you about it. What I say obviously is not evidence. I was not there when it happened, and the evidence will come from that witness stand in a few moments. The day in question was Monday, December the 9th, 2024. This country had just finished a very contentious presidential election. Many of us in our own lives were preparing for the holidays, looking forward to seeing loved ones and spending time with family. And for 43-year-old Robert Brooks, it was the last day of his life. Robert was incarcerated at the Mohawk Correctional Facility, a place right here in Oneida County. He was done with about 90% of a state prison sentence that he had received for stabbing his girlfriend in a drug-induced stupor. I don't have to tell you that. It has nothing to do with the case. These gentlemen didn't know what he was in for. They didn't know anything about him. But I don't want you to speculate, so I told you. Robert was one of about 32,000 adult men and women locked up in the state of New York crimes ranging from drug possession to murder and everything in between. And every single one of those inmates, those incarcerated individuals, had one thing in common. Their welfare, their safety, was entrusted to sworn correctional officers who took an oath to do their job, wear a badge, wear a flag on their uniform, and protect those 32,000 people, no matter what they were in for. And among them were those three defendants. There are dangerous people locked up in prison. Lord knows I know. I put enough of them there myself. But Robert was reliant on them for protection, for food, for medical care. He was told when to wake, when to sleep, and they killed him. Remember that word, they, because when each of us are subjected to the argument, I didn't do it, I didn't deliver the fatal blow, I didn't lay a glove on him, the other guys did worse, I was just following orders, it doesn't matter because they killed him. Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Kiefer, and Mr. Kingsley, along with several others. They are all charged with depraved mind murder, a carefully orchestrated act, the evidence will show, of sheer unimaginable brutality. The new guy at Marcy, Robert Brooks, met the welcoming committee of these three defendants, and in less than an hour, he was dead. Never even unpacked. Never set foot in his cell. Instead, he was in a drawer at the ME's office waiting to be autopsied and for the medical examiner to tell us how he died. It's great to suggest that prisons are dangerous places like we heard on voir dire, how Marcy is so terrible, which would have something to do with the case if Robert ever set foot in Marcy, which he didn't. He only made it to the emergency room. You will witness on tape this depravity firsthand. It will be gut-wrenching. It will be almost beyond belief that these three men, sworn to protect Robert Brooks and do their duty, treated him with such depravity.
It's a prosecutor's job to get worked up. It's a prosecutor's job to speak for people who can't speak for themselves any longer. And that's what he's doing. He hasn't even gotten to the facts of the case, he's just gotten to the results. And already, if I'm sitting on that jury, I'm upset. I'm upset because he's absolutely right. They don't give the inmates clubs or knives to protect themselves. They don't have anything to protect themselves except those correctional officers. And if what the prosecutor says is true, they certainly breached their duty to this gentleman. So let's hear a little bit about what they actually did.
So let's review what happened, what the evidence will show. On the morning of December the 9th, 2024, Robert Brooks was an inmate at the Mohawk Correctional Facility. He had been assaulted by other inmates on two occasions, December the 7th and December the 9th. Why? Not going to be able to prove that to you, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. We're going to put in evidence regarding those assaults simply to show you that they had nothing to do with his death. Rather than deal with whatever was percolating at Mohawk regarding Robert, the officials decided to transfer him to the Marcy Correctional Facility. You'll see a video of Robert that morning while he's at Mohawk. And I want you to pay careful attention to that video because he's going to be being interviewed by a corrections officer, Sergeant David Sayu. I stand here not to tell you with a broad brush that corrections officers are bad people. On the contrary, the overwhelming majority of them are decent people that do a difficult job, and we owe them our gratitude and our thanks. David Sayo is such a man. Contrast to these three defendants, you will see a correction officer doing his duty, treating Robert like a human being, which shouldn't be that hard to grasp. Sayu generally wants to find out what has happened to Robert at Mohawk. It's obvious to him that Robert is having issues, but you'll see with your own eyes, you'll see Robert being compliant, being decent, being respectful. In fact, it gets to a point where Sayu feels comfortable enough with him to remove his handcuffs. Again, our medical proof will show that the assaults that took place at Mohawk had nothing to do with Robert's death. Robert was 5'11". He was a massive behemoth of exactly 148 pounds. In his near decade in state prison, he had a whopping 1 write-up for misconduct. When he left Mohawk that night, everything he had in the world other than his 2 sons was in a couple of duffel bags that he was carrying when he got on that bus. Robert arrives at Marcy Correctional Facility at about 9:07 p.m. 9:07 p.m. And a half hour later, he's dead. He's laying helpless in the emergency room at Marcy Correctional Facility on a gurney. He's got injuries to his head, his neck, his testicles, his liver, his spleen. You'll see a tape of Robert from that evening, and he's looking into a camera that he doesn't know was on and none of these defendants knew was on, and he's pleading for his life. He's begging, someone tell me what I did wrong. Why is this happening to me?
Now keep in mind that's what the state intends to prove, and I'm sure the evidence is going to be pretty graphic and pretty ugly and all of that. But we have to remember that this is only one side of the story, that the other side does get to tell their side of the story, and each one of these corrections officers has to be judged independently from the others. Now you'll notice during this opening statement, he tried to group them all together as they. Now, I understand why he did that, but that's not how they get judged. That's not how the law gets applied to them. It gets applied to each one individually, and only if the elements are met as to each one of them for whatever crimes they have been charged with. So now let's turn to some of the defense opening statement, and we'll see what happens when the defense gets a chance at bat to tell their side of the story.
Counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Once again, I'm Luke Niebusch, representing David Kingsley, a husband, father of 3, correctional officer for over 9 years. This case comes down to David Kingsley's thoughts and intentions. David's intent, his mindset, during the events of December 9th, 2024. The district attorney has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he acted in a manner that can be considered depraved, and that he did so with complete indifference and devoid or regard for human life. Murder in the second degree. In the alternative, the district attorney has to prove David intended and wanted to cause serious physical injury to Mr. Brooks and caused his death, constituting manslaughter in the first degree. Before we talk about this specific case, let's take a moment to understand the world we are talking about. Correctional officers work in one of the most dangerous environments in our society. Every day, they step into a prison which runs rampant with drugs. They deal with men who are under the influence, who are often violent, unpredictable, and often intent on harming staff, other incarcerated individuals, or even themselves. Fights break out with little warning. Weapons are made from almost anything. Tension runs high, and officers are expected to act immediately when something happens. These are daily occurrences. And they don't get to pause, review video, or reflect. They are trained to respond quickly to control situations before they spread. Maintaining control and order in the facility is critical to the safety of the Department of Corrections, personnel, and the incarcerated individuals. That is the backdrop here. The law requires you to evaluate what happened in the context of that environment. Similar to doctors and nurses in emergency rooms or firefighters and their commanders on scene, they have to act with urgency, trusting the people behind them. You will hear that Robert Brooks was involved in fights with other incarcerated individuals at Mohawk Correctional Facility on December 7th and again on December 9th, 2024. It was at this time that Mr. Brooks sustained significant injuries, which led to the decision to separate the parties and transfer Mr. Brooks to Marcy Correctional Facility. When Mr. Brooks left Mohawk and the van pulled into Marcy, from the very beginning, he resisted instructions. He told officers what he wouldn't and wouldn't do. He ignored them and was not following lawful orders. Orders that may seem menial to you, somebody living outside those walls, but important in maintaining safety and control. That passive resistance continued through the administration building and into the vestibule area. After his leg shackles were removed, you will hear that there was an issue, and the officers brought Mr. Brooks outside where he was pepper sprayed. One officer on scene then pulled their pin, a red dot. An emergency was called, a signal that requires immediate backup because an officer may be in distress. A call where all officers who are available must respond. The officers that day responded because they are trained and ordered to do so. When a red dot is called, the responding officers have no idea what lies ahead of them or what they are getting themselves into. Even when a red dot is called off, those responding officers will always continue to the scene to make sure no further assistance is needed. And what followed was a series of chaotic events. And you will see portions of this on video. You will see officers using physical force to move and restrain Mr. Brooks. You will see strikes, attempts to get him to comply, and decisions being made in the moment, not after careful reflection. Now the district attorney will show you those clips and say, look, that's excessive, that's depraved, that's indifferent. But your job will be to evaluate whether what you see meets the legal standard of depraved indifference or intentional infliction of serious injury. Not whether it looked rough, not whether you would have done it differently, because the lives you live are much different than the lives living behind those prison walls. And the officers live there as well. There's one particular moment you will see Officer Kingsley, my client. He is holding Mr. Brooks as other officers are around him. At times you'll see him trying to reposition Mr. Brooks on the gurney. And it appears that his hands are near and around Mr. Brooks' neck as he lifts him up. Let's be direct about that. Officers are not trained to lift people by the neck. It was not the proper technique. And yes, on video, it looks violent. But here's what the evidence will show. It lasted only seconds. It was done in an effort to get Mr. Brooks upright in that specific moment and nothing more. It was done in an effort to get Mr. Brooks up. It was done in a chaotic scene, under orders to get him up, either direct or implied, with multiple people involved, including 2 sergeants who were in charge of all the correctional officers in that room. It was not done with the intent to injure. It was not done out of indifference to life. It was rough, an imperfect decision in the middle of a confusing and stressful situation. The law requires the prosecution to prove depraved indifference or intent to injure, A moment of rough handling, especially in the context of restraint, is not depraved indifference. Now let's turn to the charges themselves. The district attorney has charged 2 different crimes based on 2 different legal theories that are contradictory to one another. First, murder in the 2nd degree. This crime requires proof of a mental state of depraved indifference, that David Kingsley acted so recklessly and showed no regard for Mr. Brooks and was indifferent to his life, that he did not care whether he lived or died. Second, manslaughter in the 1st degree. This charge requires proof that David intended to cause serious physical injury, that he set out to seriously hurt Mr. Brooks, and in doing so caused his death. These are 2 very different theories. One says the actions were reckless, the other says they were intentional. Both cannot be true. You will see as this trial unfolds that the evidence does not support either theory. What happened was messy, it was physical, but it was not indifferent to life. And it was not an intentional attempt to cause serious physical injury.
Now, that's actually a pretty good opening statement for the defense. It's like, what that guy said over there, yeah, I mean, I can see he's all worked up, but he's never worked in a prison. He doesn't know what's going on. He's never seen what life is like behind those doors. And as a result, you know, when you look at the video, you're going to see things that look really rough. But again, the key issue here is intent. Was the intent to kill the guy? No, the intent was to control the guy. And you know, the guy who is leaving Mohawk prison has every incentive to be, you know, very nice, very respectful. He's getting what he wants. He's getting out of a prison he doesn't like. They're sending him to another prison. And when he gets there, he's going to tell the people who are the corrections officers how the cow ate the cabbage. He's going to do it his way, not their way. And that just doesn't work. And it's stupid from the outset. So you can see where the defense is going to go with this just from that one opening. And I think it's a pretty good strategy. But a lot of it is going to depend on the evidence that comes in during that trial. And to the extent that I can find this video that this local station is putting out, to the extent that I can find that and use it, I will do that, and I'll bring you portions of this trial so you can see and judge how effective you think these opening statements were. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here today. If you have the opportunity today, try to do one kind thing to help somebody else. Any kind thing will do. Buy somebody a Coke, get them a cup of coffee, anything that makes their day better. That would be a way to help make the world a better place. Because after all, isn't that what we're all after? Now, YouTube has a few things that they think you might be interested in, and they're going to be showing you that right up there.